Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. We have more gaming and PlayStation news, rumours and leaks to go over. So every September for the past 6 years or so, Sony has given PlayStation fans something to look forward to. Whether it's been a state of play or a full-on PlayStation showcase, September has almost become the tradition. And here in 2025, it looks like that tradition isn't stopping anytime soon. Over the past few weeks, reports have been popping up suggesting that Sony has something lined up before the end of this month. And now a name that usually carries some weight in the gaming community, Nate the Hate, has dropped a simple but strong hint. When asked about Sony's next move, he replied with just one line: Sony has a presentation soon. That's it. No extra details, but sometimes that's all you need to stir up the hype. So what exactly could this presentation from Sony be? Well, signs are pointing towards a state of play live stream rather than a bigger showcase branding. Industry insider Jeff Grubb suggested the same thing a while back, saying Sony seems to prefer that format now. But here's where things get a little bit more interesting. The rumor mill is buzzing about one game in particular, and that is Marvel's Wolverine, and we discussed this on yesterday's video. Fans have been waiting for a real look at this game ever since its brief teaser, and insiders believe it could finally take center stage. The word is the game might be targeting a 2026 release date, which makes now the perfect time for Sony to give us a proper reveal. That's not all though. Another studio under the PlayStation banner, Housemarque, has also hinted that their new project, Saros, will be shown off before the year wraps up. Remember, this is the team behind the brilliant and superb Returnal, one of the most ambitious and one of the best PlayStation 5 exclusives we've seen so far this year. So expectations are naturally high for whatever they're cooking up next. And then there's an intriguing rumor about the brand new God of War 2.5 Metroidvania game due out in 2026. Not a full-scale sequel, but something different. Imagine Kratos and Atreus in a side-scrolling, stylized adventure, something that feels both fresh and familiar at the same time. If true, that would definitely get fans talking, and it would be a brilliant game for a handheld device. And we also had rumors of a brand new God of War game from Santa Monica Studio, rumored to be in a brand new setting. Could it be ancient Egypt or even Greece? And then we have Naughty Dog's unannounced game, rumored to be an Uncharted 5 or an Uncharted reboot. Sony Ben's new project, which has already been in development for quite some time, rumored to be a AAA single-player game with some kind of multiplayer component. So much to get excited about. Of course, no PlayStation presentation would be complete without the usual third-party reveals. This is often where we see surprise announcements, exciting updates, and partnerships that nobody saw coming. So the big question is, what do you think Sony has planned for next week? Will this be the moment we get to see Wolverine steal the spotlight? Will we finally get to see gameplay of Housemarque's next big game? Or will a surprise announcement take everybody off guard? Either way, September is shaping up to be an exciting month for PlayStation fans. And if history has anything to go by, we should be getting some kind of Sony PlayStation event this month. Now moving on, and before we get into the next report, I just want to say, as someone who will always advocate for physical media, rightly or wrongly, it's disappointing to see the real hard facts. These kind of numbers don't usually lie, and over the past decade or so, we've been seeing a terrible decline in physical gaming media. It's sad to see, but unfortunately it is true. The way we buy games has changed a lot over the last few years. Think back to the PlayStation 2 era or even the PlayStation 3 era. Shelves were lined with boxed copies, shiny discs inside, and that new game smell when you first crack open the case. But today, things look very, very different. Sony's latest report shows that physical game sales now make up just 3% of PlayStation revenue. That's a huge drop from around the 6% back in 2020. Now, 3% might not sound like much, but we're still talking close to $1 billion in sales. So the money is still there, but it's just compared to the bigger picture, physical is becoming more of a niche. I thought this next bit is really interesting. Industry analysts point out that the way Sony does its accounting makes the 3% number look smaller than it actually really is. For physical games, for example, Sony only counts the full revenue from its own first-party titles. When it comes to third-party games like Call of Duty or FIFA, Sony only recognizes the royalty the share, not the full amount of the sale, which kind of sounds misleading, right? But I guess Sony is only counting the profit on these third-party physical sales. It's disappointing to see them calculate their numbers this way, because even on their own first-party physical sales, they are still including the full sale rather than just the profit per disc. Digital sales, on the other hand, are counted in full, both for first-party and for third-party games. That makes digital revenue look much bigger, even though a large chunk of it goes back to publishers and developers. So if you look at just the percentages, the numbers can be misleading. If we shift our focus from revenue to actual units sold, the story changes significantly. About 24% of all PlayStation game sales in the last year were still physical copies. So a quarter of their business was physical sale, which is better, isn't it? It's what we want to hear. Well, certainly I want to hear that. That's roughly 73 million boxed games sold in a 12-month period. So yes, the share of physical sales is still shrinking, but it's not like discs are dead. There are plenty of people who will only buy physical media, or mostly physical media. Now, this all ties to the bigger question: what does the future look like from a gaming perspective? We've already seen rumors that the PlayStation 6 may come with a detachable disc drive and not a disc drive built into the actual console. That would let players decide on how they want to experience their games, fully digital or with disc. I mean, it is a smart move, if I'm honest, because at least if you buy the PlayStation 6, you can decide whether you want to buy a disc drive and play physical games, or if you only buy digitally, then you don't need to spend the extra money on a disc drive. So it kind of makes sense, and I understand the reasons why Sony is doing it. And also from a manufacturing perspective, it's cheaper to manufacture the console and not have to assemble the disc drive for it to be manufactured, right? It's cheaper for Sony to do it this way. But the question I get asked all the time, every time I talk about buying physical discs, is why would you still prefer physical discs in 2025? And as I always reply, for me, it's a combination of collecting games and also owning my own games. I suppose the reassurance of having a copy of a game that doesn't disappear if the servers go offline. And in parts of the world where the internet connections are not fast or reliable, discs are still the more practical choice. But I can see when Sony eventually launches its PC launcher and introduces the next handheld, will we start to see an even bigger decline in physical media? Because if you then buy your games digitally, you will probably be able to play those digital games on multiple platforms, kind of like how you can with Xbox. Whereas if you buy physical games, the options to play on different devices like handheld and PC may be more limited unless you go down the remote play option. So while physical sales are clearly on the decline, they still serve an important role, and Sony seems to recognize that, which is great. And even as it does embrace a digital-first future, it does leave us with a few questions worth thinking about though. Will physical games eventually fade away completely, or will they survive as niche for collectors and traditionalists? Would you be happy with a future where consoles are digital only, or do you still want the option to hold a game in your hands? Whatever the future holds for physical games, one thing is for sure: I will be there, flying my flag, last man standing, holding onto my physical disc of The Last of Us Part 6 Remake, Remaster, Special Collector's Edition. Sony would have to make a console which is 100% totally digital, with literally no option and no physical way of playing discs before I even consider going all digital. That's just me though, personal preference. What's yours, guys? Digital or physical? Let's move on. Now, Silent Hill F marks a huge moment for the series. It's the first mainline Silent Hill title that's not a remake or a remaster since the 2012's Downpour. That's more than a decade of waiting for a brand new Silent Hill game. For fans, the anticipation has been almost unbearable. Now, reviews aren't officially out yet. They're expected to drop in just over a week, lining up with early access for Deluxe Edition owners. But here's where things get a little interesting, because some impressions have already slipped out. On the Silent Hill subreddit, a writer from Jewel Shockers reportedly called the game genuinely spectacular. They compared its combat to a Souls-like system, not completely, but with enough challenge that every fight feels like a decision. In true Silent Hill fashion, you can't just charge in all guns blazing. You need to pick your battles carefully, which adds tension to every encounter. Even more exciting, this person claimed that they had already finished the story and jumped into New Game Plus, which offers new bosses and new cinematics. That means replay value is built right in, and that's a big deal for fans of horror games that usually rely on a single playthrough. Now, if these leaks are accurate, Silent Hill F might not just be a comeback for the franchise, it could be a reminder of why Silent Hill was once considered one of the most important names in survival horror. But what do you think? Can Silent Hill F really claim its place alongside Resident Evil? Let me know in the comments, and let's move on. Battlefield 6's open beta surprised a lot of people, not just because of its classic feel with gameplay that reminded us of Battlefield 3 and 4, but also because of how well it performed. Across PC, PlayStation 5 and Xbox, the game felt stable and polished, which isn't always the case months before release, but behind the scenes things weren't always running so smoothly. The developers admitted that the Xbox Series S had major problems because of its limited memory. Christian Bull, the game's technical director, explained that about 6 to 12 months ago, a lot of their levels were literally crashing on the Series S. It just couldn't handle the sheer scale of the maps, the effects, and everything happening all at once. So the team went back and started optimizing memory usage. And here's the silver lining. All of that extra work didn't just help the Series S, it actually made the game more stable across every single platform. PlayStation 5, Series X, and even PC, all of them benefited from these fixes. After months of testing, the issues were resolved, and the Series S version is now holding up alongside its more powerful counterparts. That means no one is left behind, even if they're on the cheaper next generation console. Battlefield 6 also brings some welcome additions. Console-only crossplay for players who don't want to get matched against PC players, confirmed resolution and performance details across every single console, and soon at the Tokyo Game Show, fans will finally get their first real look at the campaign. The game officially launches on October the 10th, and for the very first time in years, excitement around the Battlefield release feels genuinely strong. So I guess the Series S does finally have its benefits after all. Because of the Series S, we're all getting better performance and stability across all the other platforms. Fantastic. Who would have thought that? Definitely not me. So let's move on. The video game industry can be brutal at times. Even the most promising projects backed by big names and passionate teams don't always make it to the finish line. And that's exactly what happened with the long-rumored Perfect Dark remake. Recently, Daryl Gallagher, the head of Xbox's The Initiative studio, announced he's leaving the company. He shared the news on LinkedIn, reflecting on his journey with the team and the work that they've put into the reimagining of Perfect Dark. Despite the cancellation, Gallagher said he feels nothing but pride for what they accomplished together. For context, Gallagher isn't just some studio lead who came and went. He's been at the head of the initiative for over 7 years. Before that, he built a career across some of the biggest names in the gaming industry: Sony, Rockstar, THQ, Activision, and most famously Crystal Dynamics, where he oversaw the Tomb Raider reboot trilogy. That trilogy is what made him the clear choice to spearhead the revival of Perfect Dark, a franchise that's been dormant for far too long. Now, Perfect Dark, the project, had already been officially cancelled a couple of months ago, but what's interesting is that behind the scenes, there was a last-ditch effort to save that project. Reports say that Microsoft tried to shop the rights around to Take-Two Interactive, hoping that they could strike a deal, but the talks fell apart because the two sides could not agree on one crucial detail: who would own the franchise in the long run? And when you think about it, that's not surprising. Perfect Dark is a legacy IP. It started with Rare on the Nintendo 64, and it has a history with Xbox, and it still carries weight with longtime fans of the series. Handing that IP off permanently to another publisher like Take-Two would have been a massive decision for Microsoft to make. So after long negotiations broke down, the project was shelved for good, and now Gallagher is officially moving on too. And in his farewell message, he thanked Xbox, their partners, and most importantly, the community that had shown excitement for what they were building. He acknowledged that the disappointment of the project ending early, but also pointed out something worth remembering. The creativity, the passion, and the teamwork that went into it just doesn't disappear. That kind of talent does move on, and it will eventually show up in future games elsewhere. And when you look back at Gallagher's resume, that's not an exaggeration. He's had a hand in everything from Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, to multiple Call of Duty titles, to the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, and even Destiny 2. So wherever he goes next, his experience is going to make the news. It does raise a bigger question though in gaming. Why is it so hard to bring back beloved franchises like Perfect Dark? I mean, I mentioned it in the video a couple of days ago about rebooting some of the PlayStation classic games like Killzone, MAG, SOCOM, Resistance, Infamous. Is it the pressure of expectations which is the blocker for these beloved franchises to reboot back up? Is it the weight of trying to modernize a classic while still trying to please older fans? Or is it simply that some games are products of their time and of their generation, and not everything can be successfully rebooted. Either way, this chapter for Perfect Dark has now, unfortunately, officially closed, but the conversation about reviving old franchises is far from over. And as for Gallagher, it's safe to say we haven't seen the last of him in the gaming industry. Guys, let me know your thoughts on the articles discussed today in the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.